You are listening to Practical and Woo by Mindset and Manifest. My name is Eden, and I invite you to embark on a journey with me to explore the practical and spiritual edges of the unknown for the purpose of allowing you to embody and empower yourself uniquely as you are and to intentionally create and live a life of freedom and fulfillment. Each week, I am going to discuss topics such as energetics, reality creation, manifestation, astrology, tarot, and more to help empower you to live beyond perceived limitations and to practically design your life so it feels like absolute magic every step of the way. Let's dive in. Well, hello, brilliant soul. We all know that haters gonna hate, but what happens when the haters are smack dab in the center of your inner circle? It can feel so incredibly disorienting when the people who you believe are meant to be closest to you are the ones creating the terrain with the most obstacles. There is something in their way of seeing you that doesn't fully meet you where you are, causing you to feel missed and misunderstood. These aren't the same kind of haters who are anonymous, trigger happy internet trolls or toxic friends who you don't mind saying goodbye to. With these distant haters, you know your boundaries can be firm and direct, and you know that you can block or walk away. But what happens when your haters are people you choose to maintain contact with? Those who remain intimately woven into your reality through history, proximity, love, or circumstance, at least for now. In other words, what does it mean to remain in relationship with people who don't always reflect you accurately, who may critique, diminish, or misunderstand you, and yet are people who still hold a place in your life that you are not ready to let go of? When we encounter relationships like this, the first instinct is to collapse into one of two extreme positions. First, we may be tempted to label such individuals as incompatible and remove them entirely, thereby creating distance as a form of self-protection. Or we may over-adapt, shrink, or shapeshift in order to maintain harmony with them, convincing ourselves that the cost of being fully seen is too high. But both of these options are extreme, and neither resolves the deeper tension at play in this kind of dynamic. When you are navigating haters within your inner circle, the aim is not primarily about managing them, but about learning how to stabilize yourself in the presence of them. When your identity, your worth, or your direction is negotiated through the perception of others, their disapproval feels like a threat. So rather than asking questions like, how do I get so and so to understand me? Or how do I protect myself from them? We begin to ask a more foundational question, which is, who am I in the presence of someone who doesn't see me clearly? And even more precisely, can I remain in relationship with myself while I'm in relationship with them? If not, how can I learn to? When someone feels overpowering or overbearing, and we don't learn how to fine tune holding our own core, we can lose ourselves within the edges of the contact that we're having with our inner circle hater. The key is developing an internal capacity to remain anchored in our perception, truth, and our own pace. Before we develop this skill, we tend to oscillate. Have you ever noticed that it's easier to feel strong and clear in yourself when you're navigating something completely by yourself, completely solo? But as soon as you're face to face with someone who feels disorienting, you feel off kilter and unsure. And sometimes for many of us, we can feel disoriented when we're face to face with anyone. And it's just that much easier to do things on our own based on our conditioning. This is the gap that we need to learn how to bridge. We need to know who we are, even in the face of being questioned. We need to learn to trust ourselves, even when feeling doubted. And we need to allow the voice of our inner truth to have a seat at our own table, even and especially when the external voice is booming in volume and attempted command. I want to invite you to imagine for a moment that you're the groundskeeper for this vast and intricate estate that comes equipped with gardens, forests, rivers, pathways, stately rooms, some of which are hidden, as well as open fields. Some areas of the property are cultivated and well tended, while others are still wild and in the process of design and refurbishment. This estate is your identity and sense of self. Now, the people in your life are invited onto this estate. Some are long term guests, while others are short term visitors. There are some who may say that a certain path is poorly designed or a certain garden isn't producing what it should. And it's important to remember that the commentary of the estate's guests and visitors does not become destabilizing simply because it exists, but it can if it suddenly influences what takes shape within. In other words, when you allow yourself to forget that this is your estate, you begin to treat the opinions of the guests and visitors as authority rather than simply perspective. You begin to question your own design choices and attempt to rearrange the landscape to accommodate their preferences. Over time, you may find yourself standing in an environment that no longer feels like your own, wondering how you traveled so far away from yourself. Here's the implication of allowing external voices to override your internal authorship. It's not that feedback unto itself is inherently harmful. It's only when you tolerate uninvited or unintegrated feedback that your sense of authorship can feel displaced. This is why it's so incredibly important to have a clear relationship with your own voice, authority, and authenticity. The key here is found in inhabiting an internal position so fully that it becomes the organizing principle of your experience. For example, if you assume that your clarity is conditional on others agreeing with you, then every single disagreement will feel like evidence that you are unclear or you're feeling confused. If you assume that your worth is contingent on being well received by others, then every critique or even piece of feedback will feel like a diminishment of your value. But if you begin to assume that your self relationship is primary, that your clarity can even exist in the presence of misunderstanding, and that your worth is not negotiated in conversation, but expressed through it, then something profound can shift. The external voices won't disappear, but they no longer hold the same gravitational pull. I want to invite you to consider that how you choose to behave within these dynamics is mirroring the expression of how you are currently relating to yourself. Do you over explain? Do you defend? Do you withdraw? Do you seek approval? When you find yourself shrinking in the presence of certain people, it's not because you're inherently small. It's because you're attempting to manage the perceived risk of being misunderstood or rejected by them. So, how do we shift this? Well, this is where boundary work comes in. Boundaries aren't primarily about controlling the behavior of others. They're about defining the conditions under which you remain in integrity with yourself. A boundary is not a demand, it's a declaration of what you will and will not participate in based on your relationship with yourself. And here's where nuance is required, especially when you're choosing to remain in contact with individuals who do not always meet you in the way you desire. I want you to remember that there's a difference between expecting someone to become someone they're not and deciding who you will be in their presence. You cannot force someone to understand you, and you cannot guarantee that they'll respond with the level of care, curiosity, or openness you would prefer, and frankly deserve. But you can always decide how you will engage, how much access you'll grant, and what you choose to do when a line is crossed. So the question is, are you willing to participate in a relationship that requires you to abandon yourself in order to maintain it? Being a groundskeeper doesn't look like needing to remove every single visitor who has an opinion. It means being clear on what is yours to tend, what is open for collaboration, and what is not at all available for negotiation. There are rooms that are available to be consumed by the public, and others that are kept synced and preserved like crown jewels. There may be areas of your life where you welcome input, where you're actively seeking perspective and refinement. And there may be areas that are deeply personal, still forming, or simply not available for commentary. Your role is to discern this difference and to communicate it with clarity. I want to be clear that communication in this context is not about convincing the other person that you're right, but about expressing yourself in a way that's aligned with your internal position, regardless of how it's being received or reflected. When you show up from your inner authority, you begin to teach others how to relate to you, demonstrating that you're not easily pulled into dynamics that require you to compromise your sense of self. As you shift, some people will adjust and become more respectful, more attuned, more aware, while others may not. Your sense of stability cannot depend on someone else's evolution. If you require your haters to change in order to feel secure, you'll remain in a state of perpetual waiting. But if you anchor your stability in your own stewardship, your own authorship, and your own relationship with yourself, then you're responding in real time to what's actually occurring rather than what you hope will eventually transpire. And this right here is the nexus where your empowerment becomes inevitable. I want you to remember that you're not at the mercy of others, nor are you defined by the accuracy of their perceptions. You are the trusted groundskeeper of your estate. Allow yourself to meet people as they are and to listen without needing to absorb. Allow yourself to remain in contact without losing your center. Allow your relationships to reveal themselves over time rather than forcing them into a predefined shape. When you trust yourself, you no longer need to preemptively guard against every potential misunderstanding or point of tension, and you won't need to categorize people as entirely safe or unsafe. You can meet each interaction as it unfolds, with the understanding that you will respond in alignment with yourself no matter what faces you. And so, the presence of haters, whether they're in your inner circle or in your corner, becomes less of a threat and more of a context you meet as you grow and develop, not only in your relationship to them, but in your relationship to yourself as well. I want you to remember to recognize that your sense of self is not something that needs to be granted, validated, or protected by others, but instead something that's cultivated, stabilized, and expressed from within you. When you hold your center, there's no need to eliminate difficult dynamics unless you want to. But either way, you will be able to bravely meet the context and experience of whatever arises before you. The only way to find the gems of love through connection of others is to discover where they are and aren't located. And the only way to know where they are and aren't located is to navigate all relationships and hold yourself steady in the process. No matter who stands on your estate, you remain the one who tends to it. Until next time.